New Orleans, the Crescent City. Once the biggest port in the South and the second largest in the nation, it is famous for its tourism and rich culture, but for a long time, it has been infamous for its failing public school system. Before Hurricane Katrina, 63% of public schools were deemed academically unacceptable by Louisiana's accountability standards. Compared to 8% of public schools across Louisiana, these schools had a graduation rate of only 56%. As someone who grew up in New Orleans and attended Catholic schools all my life, I did not realize the education environment that existed in the city was unique to New Orleans. There are so many private and parochial schools in New Orleans that it has become ingrained in New Orleans culture. In 2004, 1 in every 3 students in New Orleans attended a private or parochial school, 3 times the national rate of private school enrollment. This raises the question, what are the causes of New Orleans' unique educational situation? In 1954, Brown v. Board of Education ruled racial segregation illegal. Southerners across the South opposed the decision, and legislators in these states braced themselves for resistance. In New Orleans in particular, whites believed it would be years before schools would actually be forced to segregate. School Board President Dr. Clarence Sheps went as far to say that the decision would have no immediate effects on the New Orleans public school system. But segregation still came sooner than whites would have liked. In July 1959, the Orleans Parish School Board was ordered to have a plan for desegregation in place by the 1st of March. But when the board failed to do so, a plan was laid down for them. In September 1960, all entering first graders could choose to attend whatever school they would like in their district. Projected enrollment numbers that estimated 7,000 black first graders and only 4,000 white first graders worried white parents. Archbishop Rummel, the spiritual leader of New Orleans at the time, was in favor of desegregation and prepared to follow public schools in desegregating Catholic schools. But after much pressure from his parishioners, he was forced to stand down on the matter, stating in a pastoral letter that Catholic schools in the area would wait until desegregation in public schools was complete before moving forward. The first black students to attend white schools in November 1960 had to be escorted into their classrooms by police. 5 students were scheduled to begin that class that day, but 1 dropped out due to threats. Immediately, angry white mothers began pulling their children out of schools. White flight had begun. Whether their motives were racial in nature or parents were trying to spare their children the turmoil surrounding public schools, white upper and middle class parents began funneling their kids into private and Catholic schools in the area. Families who could not afford the expensive tuitions responded with violence and protest because they lacked the social, political, and financial clout to otherwise create change. The saying would become, if you are poor, mix. If you are rich, forget about it. While the majority of families who could afford these tuitions were white, black families who could afford it sent their children to traditionally black private schools in the area. In the 60s, blacks made up 58% of the student population in public schools. By the 80s, black enrollment represented 84% of public school enrollment. By the 2004-2005 school year before Katrina, 94% of New Orleans public school students were black. Whites and upper-middle-class blacks continued to abandon the school system as conditions worsened. As a result, the public school population became disproportionately poor and at risk. This situation was reflected in school test scores, which ranked Orleans Parish 67th out of 68 Louisiana parishes for student achievement in 2005. Governance problems and high turnover also plagued the school system. Between 1998 and 2005, the school system had 8 different superintendents. Financial mismanagement led to FBI investigations, criminal indictments, and a school system debt burden of $265 million by 2005. In the midst of these leadership crises and financial problems, school buildings were left to decay. With more school facilities built before 1950 than after, maintaining the physical condition of the buildings was a huge challenge. By 2005, many school buildings had severely deteriorated, suffering from years of neglect and deferred maintenance. Racial and socioeconomic divides have created the failing public education system in New Orleans, but since Katrina, reforms have completely changed the way schools are run, and though it is too early to tell, studies say that the new system is showing signs of improvement.